alive! It's alive! It's alive! It's alive!
Hello and welcome to Alive After Reading. I'm Tim Niederreiter, and with me today is returning guest and friend of the show, Bruce Solheim. Welcome back to the show.
Hey, Tim, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. You know, I've got this book that's out today, and I've got, you know, the general candy crunch of Easter, because it's Easter Sunday. But that's as we record this, that's coming up, actually. But it's still
Happy Easter.
Yeah, Happy Easter. It's a time. Yeah, we're a little time shifted, but you know, it's Sunday, and it only comes once a year. But it also means there's lots of candy about. Whatever. That's how it works. Even in a pandemic, I can't seem to escape that. So I'm not getting any thinner. Anyway, tell those who aren't initiated a little bit about yourself and, you know, the comic you've got out now, the new one.
Sure. Yeah, my name is Bruce Solheim, and I'm a history professor at Citrus College in Southern California, and I've been teaching college history for about 30 years. And I've written the normal type history, political science type books. And then in 2016, I decided to start writing paranormal books, which I've now written 3 of them, working on a 4th one. And I think that's what we might have talked about last time. So that was kind of a departure for me. I've also worked at Boeing. So I was a corporate guy working in as a like a contract administrator on military, top secret military programs, and also on the 747 commercial program. And and I served 6 years in the U.S. Army as a jail guard and a helicopter pilot. So I've had a lot of different experiences.
Sounds like it. I didn't know about all that stuff, and we've talked several times now.
Yeah. You know, a lot of different things to draw from as a writer. As you know, that's great to have a lot of different experiences. So I do. I got a well of, a deep well of stuff to draw from. And but comic books have always been my first love. And I've published, 10, 11 books, whatever. But it's my comic books that I'm most proud of. And I think it's because I learned how to read because of comic books. So it's kind of like it's very close to my heart. The art form of comic books, the sequential art, as it's officially called. So this new comic book's called Snarc 2. Snarc 1 came out early 2020, late 2019, and what it was is what Snarc is he's this character. He's an alien, half human hybrid. And he comes to Earth with a mission to help prepare us for invasion, which is not cool, right? And he has a cosmic staff with him that's kind of his sidekick, kind of a humorous sidekick. Well, once he gets here, because he is half human, his controllers back on his home planet thought that would help him, kind of make the connection and make it easier to prepare for the invasion. But instead, it backfires on them, and he decides he really likes humans, and he wants to preserve our our human culture, and then sets out to protect us from this incoming invasion, which of course puts him at odds with his home planet. So anyway, there's the dynamic tension.
Yeah, that sounds cool.
And then the cosmic staff is this wisecracking sidekick. He's like a stick, like a smart stick. And he really likes the Rat Pack, so he's constantly kind of talks like one of those hip cats from the 60s. One of the Rat Pack guys. They actually go to Las Vegas in this installment of Snarc, and that's kind of fun. They go back in time and meet the Rat Pack. Anyway, so so Snarc 2 is just his continuing adventures, and the way I write it in short, little bursts. So each story within the comic book, and the second comic book is actually 74 pages, so it's more of a graphic novel than a comic book. And about 3 to 5 pages is each little vignette, and they go to different places. And they have adventures learning about Americans, or learning while he's in America, but he also goes to, I guess, northern Canada as well, or Alaska. And they learn about humans, and then finally they try to do something to save the planet from this invasion. I'm not going to give it all away, but at the very end, it kind of like a cliffhanger. So there's going to be a Snarc 3.
Trilogy.
Yeah,
at least. Yeah.
And a spin-off too, because I introduced a character named Dr. Jekyll, alien hunter, who's this anthropology professor lady, and she is a middle-aged lady. She's not a superhero type person, and Snarc is kind of an anti-hero too. I'm a sucker for that kind of thing. I don't really like I like the superhero stuff, but I want it to be different. So Snarc combines history, social issues without being pedantic. I don't preach to anybody, but he sees things that are going on through kind of the eyes of an innocent, because he doesn't really understand everything that's going on. And there's a lot of humor, but there's science fiction and fantasy too. So it's a little bit of everything. It's all ages comic book, so your kids can read it. You can read it, and you'll read it differently, because there's inside jokes that adults would understand. And then there's stuff for kids to enjoy too. So I purposely did that, modeling it kind of on one of my favorite cartoon shows when I was a kid, the Rocky and Bullwinkle show, which could be viewed as both an adult and a kid, and both enjoy it. So, and Snarc is started as an idea, kind of came to me in a vision, in a paranormal sense, when I was working in a guard tower in the Army. At a prison in West Germany, when it was East and West Germany, in 1980.
Wow, it's been a while.
And
it took you some time to realize this vision.
Yeah, I just kind of ruminated, and I didn't bring it to life until I went to engineering school in Butte, Montana, at Montana Tech, and then I did a comic strip. I illustrated and wrote it, and I did 5 comic strips for the Montana Tech Technocrat newspaper, which I still have. And so that was in 1982. And then I flunked out of engineering school. So I went back in the Army. And then anyway, so Snarc got put in the background. I always wanted to do a comic book. And then finally, 2019, January, my son, Byron, who's my second eldest son, he became an engineer. So fulfilling what I was to do. He's a very successful engineer in the automotive industry in Ohio. And anyway, he has a 3D printer and a forge. So he 3D printed a Snarc bust and gave it to me as a late Christmas present in January 2019. Well, that inspired me to bring Snarc back off out of the closet and bring him to life. And I got my friend Gary Dumm, the illustrator from Cleveland, who I've been working with already. Got him on board with the concept. He loved it. He digs it, and he wants to illustrate it. And so that took us about a year. And then by the end of the year, we had the first Snarc comic. And it's kind of retro for those of your listeners who like kind of that 60s, 70s vibe in your comics. It's not printed on newsprint, so there's no you don't have to worry about that. It's on nice paper, just like modern comics.
Yeah, but the art style's more.
It's the art style that's retro, so it's kind of really clean and that retro style, which really fits nicely with this particular comic. So, anyway, that's kind of the. It took 37 years to make it a comic book. So
that's I guess, quite a journey, indeed. Yeah. Yeah.
The bottom line is don't give up on your ideas. You never know when they'll present themselves again for writers and illustrators. That's it's important.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that. Sorry, go on.
No, go ahead.
Oh, okay. It's funny you mentioned that though, because the book that's coming out today, it's called Well Country, and it is the book. It's the third book in my epic fantasy series, the Demon Hunter series, but it's also kind of the end of the beginning in some ways. Is this weird feeling I have with it? Is like, wait a minute, I got to the point that I envisioned 15 years ago when I was writing the original notes for this setting. Which is the interesting part. Yes, it's a little bit parallel there. I'm not quite as big of a time frame, but yeah.
Well, yeah, I'm a little bit older than you too.
A little bit.
Yeah, I'm 62, so I've been letting this germinate for a long time. But yeah, it's never too late. And I was saying also, obviously there'll be a Snarc 3, but before there's a Snarc 3, there's going to be a spin-off comic, Dr. Jekyll, Alien Hunter. This female character, and she is an anthropology professor, and she has interesting adventures too. So the third comic book in the series will actually be a prequel to Snarc, and then I'll come out with Snarc 3.
Yeah, dangle them on the hook a little longer, will you?
Yeah, and I'm already
cool.
I love the idea of a larger universe of comic books. So we'll see how that goes. So, but yeah, I love it. I love all the writing I do. I love the paranormal books. I still love history and writing about history and historical events. But man, the comic books is just, it's like a dream come true. Back to my childhood. And homage to what really I wouldn't, if it wasn't for comic books, I wouldn't be where I am today.
Yeah, you said they taught you to read. What kind of comics did you read when you were just getting started reading? Do you remember?
Yeah, everything I can get my hands on, from Archie to the Disney comics to Marvel, Fantastic Four. I remember the Hulk. I like the Hulk a lot because he was so misunderstood, and I felt misunderstood as a kid. And I like the Fantastic Four, the Thing. I thought he was misunderstood too, so kind of a interesting character. And so those are I just read everything I can get my hands on. And actually, in the late 70s, I got a hold of American Splendor, which was kind of like an underground comic because Robert Crumb, who's a very famous artist, was one of the artists in American Splendor that Harvey Pekar did, the famous Cleveland guy who kind of changed comics in the 70s. Unfortunately, he died in 2010. They came out with a movie about his life called American Splendor in 2003, starring Paul Giamatti as Harvey Pekar. But anyway, I noticed that American Splendor, and then when I was thinking about I wanted an artist to work on another project for my history textbook that I wrote. I wanted to do comic book pages in it at each chapter about the historical events. So I looked at this old American Splendor and I saw Gary Dunn. I'm not going to get Robert Crumb to do it, right? I mean, that's just shooting.
It's a little bit too far out of reach there.
And I think he's really retired anyway.
Well, that makes sense.
So I was noticing the art, and I really like Gary Dunn's art, and I was really attracted to it. So I sent him an email and said I was doing this anti-textbook. I call it an anti-textbook. And he dug it and said, yeah, let's work together. And that started our thing. And then he illustrated the 3 paranormal books, and then he did Snarc. So I didn't have to twist his arm too much about doing Snarc because we
he's already been working with you. Yeah,
cool. We like working with each other. It's a very symbiotic relationship.
So do you write him a bunch of I may have asked this before because I think we actually did talk about the first issue of Snarc, but do you write a bunch of what you want in there in each panel or whatever? Do you write instructions, or do you just kind of give an overview? How detailed does that get?
No, it's pretty deep. I mock up a comic book.
Okay.
I illustrate myself.
That's true.
I do illustrations myself, but I am nowhere near the quality and expertise that Gary has. So what I do is I'll mock up rough sketches, panels, all the narration, all the dialogue. I'll send it to Gary. He'll look at it and say, okay, this works. This doesn't work. How do you think about this? So we work together, but he does, obviously the art.
Yeah, he does the final kind of artwork, yeah.
Yeah, I'm just giving him ideas, and then sometimes I'll use a photograph. I'll just take something out of a magazine. Okay, this is kind of what I vision in my head, and then he'll, he might go with that, or he might choose something else. And we work very well together. So, like he told me when he was working with Harvey Pekar, Harvey would give him sheets of paper with stick drawings on them and tons of dialogue, just way too much for each page, So he said it was a different process. As much as he loved Harvey and loved working with Harvey, it was sometimes kind of difficult because of that. Yeah. I make it a little bit easier for him in the way that I present it to him initially.
Yeah, I've heard people with Alan Moore, Alan Moore, the famous comics writer. He was He apparently he didn't illustrate his at all. From what I imagine, from what I've heard, he just did these huge walls of text in each panel or whatever when he'd send them to the artist. But they'd be very specific, exactly what he wants to see in each of these panels. He's very kind of controlling in that way.
Yeah, I'm not controlling it all. I mean, I do suggest, because I send him some drawings, but they're rough drawings, so I'm not married to them. I trust Gary. He knows how it works, how the panels should work. He knows how to fit things together. Sometimes I'll present a really messy collage, and he'll turn it into something beautiful. He just knows how to do it, how to do the transitions, and how to keep the character looking the same. Which as an illustrator, that's tough to do. Otherwise, every time you turn a page, the character looks a little different. But he's got the expertise. So it's a joy working with him, and I've learned a lot more about, from an insider's view about comics. And then his wife Laura does all the lettering and the color.
Okay.
So they work as a husband and wife team. And then I got a friend up in Seattle named George Varangos who does the editing. You always need a good editor, and he does the editing for the comic books. And it wasn't a hard. I didn't have to twist his arm too much either, because as it turned out, he was a fanboy of Gary Dumb. So
fits in right real well there. Yeah.
Yeah, just really nice relationship there.
Yeah, it's a small world, really, and that when you look at it like that, it fits together like a puzzle.
Yeah.
And kind of intriguing that way, actually.
Yeah, and he liked the story too, and he had some good suggestions. So it's kind of I call it the Snarc team. Yeah. And we all need each other, and I enjoy working with all of them, and I've already presented the idea. I've already illustrated the mock-ups, at least for not for Snarc 3, but for Dr. Jekyll, and it's going to be a graphic novel length too. It's pretty big.
Okay.
So I decided if I'm going to go with the comic, I'm not going to make it a traditional comic. I'm going to make it a graphic novel, and then I can go the Amazon route and have them print it on demand rather than the Snarc 1. I paid for all the printing.
That's got to be a limiting factor. Yeah.
And I got 3,000 comics in my garage, and my wife Ginger said, "No, you're not going to be bringing
not again. We're not doing that again."
Yeah, we're running out of space. So we just went the Amazon route. It's a lot cheaper, although you kind of lose some of your control.
Yeah. No, I mean
that's okay. There's a trade-off, and they got the big marketplace and all that, so it's.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, are you going to do digital comics with this at all? Or are you?
Yeah, Snarc 1 is they're both digital.
Okay.
Snarc 1 is a traditional digital, I guess. I don't know if there is such a thing, but anyway, it's on Comixology.
Okay.
Snarc 1 is a digital comic, and then Snarc 2 is a print and also on Amazon, print and ebook. So yes, digital.
Okay, so as opposed to writing your nonfiction, what sort of challenges does writing a comic book present, I suppose?
Well, I'll quote Harvey Pekar. He said, you can do anything with words and pictures. So there's no really limitations with comic books. You can let yourself go anywhere. And I do some crazy stuff with Snarc, because every 4 or 5 pages, they're jumping to a new location, new exciting stuff going on. So it's not like a traditional comic where there's a storyline that goes through the whole comic in a one story. Yeah. I have many stories. I think there's 16 stories. So
it's like an anthology. Yeah.
But they're tied together. So it's not totally episodic. They are tied together and ends with a cliffhanger. So that's kind of the way I conceived of it. It is different than, my paranormal memoirs, which are nonfiction, and my history books, all nonfiction. It's a different kind of writing. My academic books, you're kind of constrained, and sometimes I just want to break free from that. So doing comics, writing plays, I'm a playwright too. I've had 5 plays produced now.
Wow.
It's just another way a different way of writing and I write songs too. So I do as much writing as I can in as many different modalities and forms that I can. And each one has its pluses and minuses. But I really enjoy all the different ways that I produce, written stuff. I write poetry too.
I was wondering. I was going to ask actually, because I've been thinking about writing more poetry lately myself.
Oh,
I've written a few poems back but mostly I haven't done that a whole lot lately. It's mostly prose for me these days.
Yeah, it depends on what comes to you. I feel what I'm compelled to write then dictates what kind of format it's going to be in. Like when I wrote my first play, it was a very tragic story. A friend of mine committed suicide. He's a Vietnam vet, and it was an incredible story. How he, a tragic story. I didn't know how to present it. I could have written an historical article about Vietnam vets and suicide. That would have been relevant. I could have written some other way, but I decided to write it as a play because of the way the imagery came to me. And I said, it just suggests that it should be a theatrical play. The only problem was I hadn't written a play. So that's a steep learning curve.
That's a different challenge. Yeah.
I got like dozens of books on playwriting. I took a class at Cal State LA with Jose Cruz Gonzalez, who's now retired, but a wonderful playwright. So I just learned as quickly as I could. And so really it's whatever project comes to me as compelling that I have to do this story. It will then suggest if it should be a comic book or a play or a book or novel or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. Most of the stuff that I think of always presents itself as like, this needs to be a novel, because that's just my kind of way I think about it.
Yeah.
But, and that's kind of helpful in a way, because it means that I can focus on one kind of craft, one side of it for the most part. But there's always that the poetry is the next biggest urge I get. Really, it's it's the one I'm like, I really want to do that sometimes. Especially when I hear a really good poem, or like on J. Daniel Sawyer's podcast right now, he's been reading classic poems every now and then. His Everyday Novelist podcast. He's been reading. He read like Kubla Khan and The Second Coming, a bunch of these public domain poems. That are just really striking. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's really gotten me like thinking like, I should write some poetry again, because I'm thinking like, because this is the kind of stuff I really like when I in poetry. They don't have to be long. They don't have to be like an epic poem that shakes it's 100 pages or actually more like 500 pages in the case of something like The Fairy Queen, which isn't even complete. God, being an English major was kind of rough sometimes. I liked that story, but it was difficult to read at the time. Did
you ever do any poetry readings, like public readings? Like in the early 90s, I used to go to these up in Seattle and Tacoma, up there when I lived in Washington State, and they were a lot of fun. But then it got to be more of a performance thing, the beat poetry kind of thing, and it was cool. But I'm not really a performer. I'm really a writer, so I kind of got left in the dust by these people who were very dynamic, and they were animated, and they started having like a guy playing the bass, the bass fiddle in the background. So it
becomes a bit more involved. Yeah.
Yeah, if I'm going to do that, I'm just going to write a song.
Right.
That would be lend itself, because I play the guitar. So anyway, but it was fun. I enjoyed it. It was really raw. And I still very much enjoy poetry. It's a very different way of communicating, and comic books, what's officially called sequential art, is a very unique way of writing too. And you have to be really careful to not be redundant with each panel. The panel tells a story. You can't tell the same story in writing that the panel's telling, and you have to keep it moving, and not have too much dialogue. Otherwise, your eye goes crazy. So,
no, that makes sense. That makes so much sense, because it's kind of like because redundancy is one of the worst things you can do in fiction too. Or at least it feels bad to me anyway. It's like, oh yeah, it's like I'm back in grade school, and people are telling me the same thing 3 times in a row just to make sure everybody in the class gets it. And you don't want that in a piece of fiction by any means. Like that's yeah.
Too much exposition, you got to be, and I think the closest writing I can think to writing comic books would be like writing a screenplay.
Okay.
So it's like storyboarding. How they storyboard in a screenplay and making movies. That would be somewhat similar to it. So it's kind of close to that, but it has its own rules that, of course, a screenplay storyboards don't have. There are certain rules to sequential art, although rules are made to be broken sometimes, but there's a way of telling a story, and I rely on Gary to know all the tricks of the trade, and he does a wonderful job.
True collaboration, right? You gotta trust each other for that kind of thing, and that's pretty special, actually. I honestly, yeah.
And you put your egos aside. I don't get, if he says, this doesn't work, I'll say, okay, that's cool. Or he might do something. I said, Gary, that doesn't make sense for this. Oh, okay, all right.
Yeah.
So we were able to do that without any hesitation or anybody getting hurt feelings and dropping out of the project or what, something. But I'll tell you this: good art is not cheap. So
no.
And he's worth every penny. Him and Laura, what they do. So it is kind of an expensive thing. It'd be a lot cheaper if I could illustrate my own comics, but my standards are too high for what I want to produce. So I maybe in the future I'll do something, but I don't know. I would really have to improve. It would take me years just to illustrate in one page, because I'd want to get it as good as Gary. But I don't have that time.
At least, but you got Gary. You can work with him. As long as you get that chance, you might as well take it, right?
Yeah, and he's in his 70s now, but he's going strong. So I hope he doesn't drop me. So.
Well, yeah. Well, Bruce, it's been fun, but the time really got away from us this time. It's getting close. We're already running out.
Yeah. And what's the name of your book again? I know your book. It came out today.
Well Country. I was getting to that point. WELL. Well, as in like a well that you find in the ground, and then country. Pretty simple. Okay. But because in this story, there's this is a world where there are demons that live in the center of the earth, basically, and they can crawl up through these things called world wells. And well country is where a lot of world wells come out, and it's a particular region of this on the surface that this story is set in this particular.
You're hitting me where I live. I like that paranormal stuff. I should say there's a particular troll in Norway called a Brunican, and he lives in wells, and he's very long and skinny and has very long arms.
Oh, that's
and the
creepy.
Story is if you go near the well, or child, he'll reach up and grab you and drown you.
Ooh.
So it's scary, but it's also a good lesson for kids not to go near wells.
Absolutely. Got to stay, and especially if you don't have a dog named Lassie running around.
Yeah, exactly.
Help save you if you fall in. Yeah. Lassie versus the Brunican. Yes, that's exactly. That's gonna be another comic book. No doubt. Eventually, no.
Awesome.
No, who can say? Dog versus troll, though. That's not a bad. I don't know what kind of matchup that's like.
That would be fun. Be fun to illustrate.
That'd be interesting. Yeah. Anyway, so Bruce, tell us again where you can find your comics and your website and such. That kind of
the easiest place to go, just go to my website. That's my all-purpose website, bruceolavsolheim.com, and my middle name spelled OLAV, last name SOLHEIM. So bruceolavsolheim.com. You can also go to Amazon and find Snarc 2 and all my paranormal books and everything else. And so that's what people can do. They can see the other things I'm up to, the other projects and my plays too that I've written. So
yeah, creative dynamo Bruce Solheim.
Oh yeah, and then there's music on there too. You can listen to some of the weird and tortured music that I've created.
Oh, great! That was fun, Bruce. Nice chatting with you again.
Yeah, it was great, Timothy. I look forward to our next time.
Absolutely. Hopefully. Yeah, absolutely. And by the way, exactly. Can't wait as well. That sometimes 30 minutes is barely enough. Sometimes it's not enough, and it's not enough when I'm talking to you. But anyway, it's great. It's always great. And thanks for listening, everybody. You can find more about this podcast at mentalcellarpublications.com. You can find my books on amazon.com. That includes the Demon Hunter series. That's Well Country. And then in reverse, let's go in order. But it starts with Demon Scroll, and then and there you go. So thanks for listening, folks. Chat with you again soon, and happy Easter if you celebrate it. Take it easy, and stay safe out there.
That tears it.